So they can't manage the wiles of life. The wiles of life and the wiles of the enemy are going to be there. Tricks and difficulties and traps. But you want to make sure you have on everything you're supposed to have so you can manage all of your life. So Paul said, decide to be strong, decide to be fully dressed. This is what I love, this verse 12. Decide to accept the reality of your conflict. Decide to accept the reality of your conflict. You know, I love verse 12 because it says, we do not wrestle against flesh and blood. Now, I love that. He said, you know, I want you to understand that in life, you are in a combat situation. Some of you've been really frustrated. You've been talking to God and you've been telling God about your problems and singing about it. And a lot of gospel music is just, you know, I love it, but, you know, sometimes it's kind of sad music. Because you're always holding on to something. Just coming out of something, going into something. And I want you to understand, God wants you to decide to accept the fact that you are in a wrestling match. That is the reality of your conflict. You are a wrestler, and I think he didn't choose boxing because, you know, in boxing, you know, you move around, you stick and you jab, and karate is real famous, you know, real fast. Yeah, you know, all that. No, wrestling is sweating, hold on the ground, rolling around. He said, as a believer, sitting in jail, we need to decide to be strong. We need to be fully dressed because this is a wrestling match. And if you're married, you know all about that. Say amen. If you teach in school, it's all about that. If you are a person who deals with the public on a daily basis, you know all about that. It's a wrestling match, and that's the reality, so don't complain. Decide to accept it. I've decided to accept that I'm in a wrestling match. And then I've also decided to stand. I've decided not to complain. I love verse 13. Therefore, take up the whole armor of God that you may be able to withstand in the evil day. And having done all to stand, what do? Stand. It's a decision. I'm standing, not moving. I know I'm in a wrestling match. I know, and I'm not moving. I'm standing here, and I'm not going to complain. There's something powerful about people who don't back down, who stand up and say, you know, this is okay, who don't cry and ask God to take away the wrestling match. They understand that's part of it. That's part of the challenge. And believe it or not, every day of my life, I'm back at this verse. Every day of my life, I decide to be strong. Every day of my life, I decide to go fully dressed. Every day of my life, I decide to accept the reality of my conflict. I am a wrestler. I decide to stand.